Tēnā koutou katoa. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Westpac SMARTS webinar on supply chain issues. My name is David Hope, and I'm the Head of Industry for Manufacturing and Wholesale Trade for Westpac Business Bank. It's my absolute pleasure today to host this webinar, which is the third in a series of Westpac SMART sessions aimed at informing you, the business community, about topical business issues that have arisen with the COVID-19 pandemic. We hope the session will provide you with some insights, some tips and tricks for managing your business through this period of global uncertainty. Today's session is all about the current supply chain issues, and it follows previous sessions we've had on planning for the future and HR challenges that my colleagues John Michelle and Amber McKnight have hosted. I'll just start off by saying thank you for joining us and giving us your time this afternoon. We've got a large audience, we've had lots of registrations, and that means there's a lot of interest in this topic, and I hope everyone gets something out of today's session. Just briefly before we start, my role as Head of Industry is to set the direction and strategy for and to lead a team of 27 relationship managers for Westpac across the country and help them provide great service and deliver insights to our large base of manufacturing and wholesale trade customers. And today's a perfect example of that. So today we have a very special panel of experts here, which I'll introduce to you. Firstly, we have the Chief Executive of the New Zealand Building Industry Federation, and he also has his own consulting business called Premium Strategies, Julian Leys. Hi, Julian. Julian's a recognised expert on supply chains and has become one of the go-to experts the news media call on for commentary. Next up, we have Chief Executive Officer of Oceanbridge Shipping, Scott Wilson. Now, Scott's been with Oceanbridge since 2004 and is a renowned logistics expert, helping Oceanbridge grow into one of the leading consolidators of cargo to and from New Zealand. Welcome, Scott. And next up, we have Steve Thompson, who's Westpac Head of International Trade Business. And Steve leads a team of international trade relationship managers for Westpac. Now, Steve's vastly experienced when it comes to import and export matters and is a specialist in the meat and dairy processing sectors. So it'll be great to hear from you, Steve.
Thanks, Dave.
And rounding things off, we have Trevor Farrell, who's an international business manager, who's part of Steve's team, and Trevor's right in the thick of things at the moment, helping our customers navigate their trade finance positions in real time. So the way we'll run this today is a fairly informal sort of a question and answer session directed by myself with three themes or topics for the first 40 or so minutes. Then we'll take questions which you can type into the panel as we go, and we'll cover those off at the end. So the topics we'll cover are firstly, the causes and some general observations of where things are at right now in terms of supply chain disruption, both globally and in New Zealand. Secondly, logistics within New Zealand and what logistics managers are having to deal with and how they're going about it. And thirdly, some potential solutions, including how you can be supported by your bank. Okay, so topic one, let's crack straight into it, starting on the subject of the causes of the current supply chain congestion. And Julian, I just want to start off with you with the, I guess, the obvious point that the global supply chain is stretched like it never has been before, and that's affecting everyone around the world, and that includes us here in New Zealand. A lot of countries' supply chains seem to be in a real mess, particularly in the US. Could you talk us through how the world got into this situation? You know, what were the dynamics that caused this?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, David. Look, I think what COVID's done is it's exposed how fragile the global supply chain actually is. And so going into this period of disruption, it showed that we had underinvested in technology, new products, local manufacturing. When COVID actually hit, what we did see was many manufacturers and suppliers actually didn't know or even have complete visibility over their supply chain. So, for example, they didn't know who supplied their suppliers and who supplied them. And not having that information meant that initially, people couldn't react or know how to diversify their risk. What we've also seen through this is that the global supply chain is incredibly complex at the same time as being fragile. And if we look at things like component manufacturing, so power tools, for example, power tools are made up of a huge number of different parts, many of which are made in different parts of the world and then assembled somewhere else. So when you start disrupting some of those links, joining this sort of web together, then you either don't get the product or it's, there's a lead in time of months, which is what we're starting to see. So I think I think this has just exacerbated those sort of weaknesses that were always in the supply chain, and now when you add to that all the other, well, a period of prolonged stress and a myriad of other factors such as shortages of skilled labour, it means that we're in the situation where we are having to wait for things. Things are going up in terms of cost, and it's it's incredibly frustrating. So that's where we are.
Okay, and it'd be remiss not to ask you what's actually happening in the building and construction sector at the moment, your sector.
Oh, look, a lot, and it's changing almost daily. So we're seeing, changes in terms of increase in cost. Prices are going up for products, and to the point where people can't actually rely on a quote for longer than 2 weeks now, may even be a week. We're seeing people now starting to essentially, ration, if you like, in terms of who gets what product. So it's got to the point where people are really having to, those in the know, plan ahead, often in the case of months because of lead-in times, and get a lot more clever in terms of where and how they source product, because the whole just-in-time delivery model's pretty much gone out the window.
Right. So with Auckland still contending with heavy restrictions and likely to remain so for quite a while yet, how's that actually impacting productivity and efficiency of the supply chain?
Look, it's definitely having an impact because some manufacturers and builders and contractors can't operate, with a full crew. It's meaning that people are still having to put up with delays in moving product around. It's having an impact also on completion. So it's less than ideal. People can get product out of Auckland, thankfully, under level 3 and can carry on to a certain extent, but we would love to be able to move to level 2.
Right. Scott, over to you. 90% of the world's goods are transported on our seas, and this year we've seen the fragility of that shipping network. We saw a lot of congestion earlier this year with ships trying to feed into the US and Europe, and we're seeing it flare up yet again with dozens of container ships waiting to dock outside the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. At some point, over 70 container ships waiting, I see. That's looking to unload tens of thousands of goods trying to get into the US. And I know those two ports handle almost half of all the container ships entering the US. What are you hearing and seeing on this, Scott? And what about New Zealand? Is the same happening here?
Yeah, thanks, David. We see that in Auckland and Tauranga in particular, in our market, congested. But Europe, and in particular, as you mentioned, the US has fared much worse, and the numbers vary each day. But in terms of off the coast of LA, there could be 60, 70 container ships sitting there waiting to berth. Some can be there for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. Estimation the other day that there was over 500,000 TEU valued at $22 billion US, which is the turnover globally of McDonald's, right? It's just sitting idle on these vessels. So it is a big problem. It's mainly due to probably the following factors brought on by COVID, really. Number one, working from home. So, government's put out this directive, led to everybody purchasing a desk, another computer screen, a chair, home gym equipment, all this sort of stuff. And all that had to come from China, right? Secondly, the inability to travel. So all of a sudden, people wanted to spend their savings, and I think we're probably all guilty of that too. We brought, new bathrooms, which Julian's team, would have fixed up, kitchens, spa pools, bikes, anything we could get our hands on. We just wanted to spend money. Again, a lot of this stuff came from China. In the warehouses, particularly through the US, they were forced into social distancing, like we all were. and this tended to slow the container flow back through to the shipping line depot, then to the exporter, which eventually resulted in the lack of equipment, making its way back to China for the demand. So we've all seen that issue in shipping. You might be able to get a booking, but you can't get a container. So that slowness of the movement of containers around the world has had a great effect. Lastly, I think a lack of staff at the terminals, through obviously COVID infections, people being unwell, having to stay at home. That also affected the rail ramps throughout the states, people driving the trucks. So local infrastructure just couldn't match the increased volume that we saw. In New Zealand, to a certain extent, it's been a problem. But on a much smaller scale, obviously. And this is what we're all experiencing at the moment. Importers, the issue starts with getting a booking. With port delays, a normal weekly service is now only calling New Zealand on an average of 42 times instead of 52 times a year. So whilst the New Zealand volume hasn't grown much through the COVID period, that's actually reducing the capacity by about 20 to 30% in most instances. So once you secure a booking, your supplier has to battle to get a container. That's successful. It needs to be loaded on the vessel and not bumped to the next one or the one following. So we're also seeing transshipment ports being very congested at the moment, and Singapore is a classic example of that. Some lines are waiting 4 to 6 weeks to reload those containers onto the next vessel down to New Zealand. Exporters, the same sort of thing. Bookings are generally easier to come by. Accessing equipment, especially out of Auckland, has been a bit difficult at times, as these containers aren't moving around the country as what they would be normally. Hopefully then the vessel doesn't bypass your load port. Then you run into the transshipment issues again, especially through the subcontinent.
Okay. Scott, we may be jumping ahead to potential solutions, but one of my pet subjects of interest is coastal shipping. And I've seen some reports quite recently, and I've actually seen for myself lots of empty containers stacked up 8 or 9 high at certain ports. So it seems that the containers aren't exactly where we need them sometimes. And if you combine that with a fragile rail network and the government's desire to green the transportation supply chain, especially trucks, seems to me we may need to look at coastal shipping once again with government support, perhaps. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And David, you probably touched on a real touchy subject there. You get a lot of passion going. You're correct. New Zealand imports come into where the population is. Predominantly that's in Auckland. And our exports generally leave where the grass grows. And these areas just, unfortunately for New Zealand, just don't match up. As the vessels are delayed, the ports will restrict the shipping lines to a certain number of container exchanges. So the lines need to juggle the volume of imports, they need to move out empties from Auckland, and also to load full export containers as well. So consideration also needs to be on which ports will be emitted to catch up on the schedule too. It's really the pricing ex-China that is driving the thoughts of these shipping lines at the moment. New Zealand needs to stay relevant in this case. Or we face the risk of vessels being redeployed to a more profitable trade lane. We have a lot of ports in New Zealand. This is the issue. The shipping lines will do a tiki tour around 2 islands for what really is a small amount of volume for them on a global scale. So something as an industry we should be definitely worried about. A main port probably in the north and one in the south with an efficient coastal network connecting the rest of the country should be one option on the table. I think this has to be driven by the government, and I feel I'd be interested to hear the thoughts of our listeners, I think, on that one.
Yeah, well, feel free to post your comments or questions as a reminder. Thanks, Scott. Okay, back to Julian. I'm just wondering whether the current supply chain disruption causes won't actually go away until consumer demand falls. What's your feeling on this, and are you willing to put a time frame on when we meet normalisation? Well, Julian, I think you're on mute.
I think with many builders and construction companies having their order books full for the next 2 years, and with the pipeline of activity that we know, it's going to be at least that long before we see sort of any leveling out. I mean, also, I think we should think about too the new consents for homes. That's reached a record of I think 46,000. We've only ever built 40,000 in New Zealand in the good times. So with a lack of 50,000 construction workers, that's not going to happen anytime soon. So I think in terms of the demand, it's not likely to peak until at least I'd say going into 2023. But then we've got everything else in terms of Scott's mentioned containers and shipping. That won't start to improve either, I don't think, until 2024. So it's going to be a little bit of pain for a little bit longer yet, David.
Right, okay. Okay, if we move on to our second topic, which is logistics and what logistics managers are having to deal with in terms of supply chain management. Scott, just to clarify, is logistics management and supply chain management one and the same?
Well, for me, supply chain is the end-to-end movement of your goods. So either from your supplier to yourselves or from you to your customer. It involves sourcing the product, order and stock management, and the transportation. Whereas logistics is really just the movement or storage portion of these goods. Right.
So how's the daily routine changed as a logistics manager over, say, from 5 years ago to right now in the middle of COVID?
Oh, I'd say it's brought the logistics or supply chain manager to the boardroom table, is what I like to say. Before, there was little barriers in the way of results. The focus was all about price. But in this current environment, a good supply chain manager could be the difference, I think, between record sales and possible failure of the business.
Right. And how can, in your view, how can logistics managers help build resilience into the supply chain?
Yeah, there's a number of things, and our customers talk to us a lot about this sort of thing as well every day. Number one, stick to what you know. So don't be tempted to go and try something different in the hope that it'll change the result without doing your homework. I think that's pretty important. Number two would be to stick to who you know. Your relationship with your current provider is key. Need to be clear about your expectations, but also listen to what they're saying and the issues that they may have in meeting your required targets. I think the time to reassess your provider, if necessary, should probably wait till things start to settle down a little bit more. But be the educator at your workplace too. So I think you'll have more of a voice nowadays than before. Don't let your sales teams overpromise to their customers. Ensure they're equipped with all the knowledge they need to set the expectations. I think most importantly, just be flexible. The cost will change, the vessel will be delayed. Set appropriate lead times, communicate this to all concerned, track the shipment milestones ahead of time, and order appropriately.
Right. Okay, thanks. Steve, Thompson, over to you. We're hearing and seeing companies placing a lot of panic orders, trying to build up stock before the holidays, given consumer demand continues to be really strong. And I know some of the logistics managers we've been talking to suggest it's a constant renegotiation exercise trying to get these containers prioritised to the right New Zealand ports. That's importers and exporters. What are you seeing and hearing, talking to the businesses that you deal with?
Sure, Dave. Thanks very much. Look, these are certainly challenging times and the hardest global shipping situation since World War II. And you put that in the context, it suddenly has some relevance to today. We've all heard about experiencing the economic and the social effects of delays. So all of those behaviours are coming to the fore. Less so now that people are getting sort of adjusted to the new operating model, if you like, of the world. But this is significantly different from any of the initially comparable shocks that we've faced, like the Asian crisis and the GFC. It's more magnified and sustained. It's affecting both the physical and the financial supply chains. The one exporter I spoke to he's been in this business for 40 years. Is just saying he's never seen anything like it, and continues to say that he's forever having to reforecast his cash flows and his container movements. He's got to deliver to his customers' expectations. So there's a lot of that happening, both import and export. And the opportunity when we're dealing with a wide range of New Zealand importers and exporters is that we've been fortunate enough to get some of the insight that Scott and Julian have alluded to, and how supply chain managers are coming to the fore, how it is so important to be across all the movements of your goods, where they are in the world, and can you deliver to your customers' expectations and your contractual obligations. And in some cases, that's proving quite difficult. So you're continuously having to communicate, and that's been the strength out of all this. It's hard to see those potential opportunities. Julian mentioned 2024, and for a resolution of the shipping scale, it could well be that duration. Ultimately, you're trying to build to a more sustainable line, and at the moment, we don't know what that is. We'll just adjust to the new norm, as I said before. But back to individual customers, though, each customer faces their often unique circumstances, and have been compelled to develop their own strategies to deal with the landscape, or the seascape, really. So reconfiguring aspects of their business in response to the circumstances. For example, after last year's carnage, some large-scale integrated retailers have secured their supply mid-year in anticipation of compressed deliveries, despite sort of their robust procurement strategy, which is, as Scott mentioned, premised on just in time. Just deliveries won't make it to the shelves or even into New Zealand. The large-scale people have managed to do it. Walmart and Lowe's and Home Depot in the States have actually chartered vessels to get around those port delays. They're calling it container-geddon. It's awesome. But mid-sized companies don't get that opportunity. They haven't been able to secure supply as other countries' orders are larger, and the profitability in it is mentioning about we're the end of the supply chain in New Zealand. So we're considered to be a risk, and for construction equipment, that's materials, that's got to be a significant problem. Scott alluded to the need probably for hubbing. And that could be, the shipping companies are looking at Australia, not coming to New Zealand. So we've got to, get used to customers who are facing those challenges. So yeah, there's lots of common themes here, and every business sector has its own individual characteristics, if you like. But it's certainly a challenge, and it's had to compel companies to look at their strategies and their internal and external communications. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Scott, back to you. On the container situation from your point of view, what's it looking like in New Zealand at the moment? I mean, I hear in the US, for every 10 containers coming in from Asia, only 4 going out. What are you seeing?
Yeah, in New Zealand at the moment, it's actually not too bad. The vessels don't quite have the delays at the ports of Auckland like they did have maybe 6 months ago. So there's more time for them to unload and load the containers. This is allowing empties to move around the country a little easier, and the vessels aren't skipping the ports as often. But as I say, this is a moving beast, and a couple of weeks ago it was quite messy. So it's not perfect, and it's very fragile. I think that's the key message to take away. The USA and transport services, especially, are definitely the worst, mainly due to that congestion on the west coast of America that you've alluded to. So the risk is that it returns to what it was like before, especially with Christmas coming. Many businesses I'm talking to are just trying to keep pace with demand, so they order more and more.
Thanks, Scott. So Julian, back to you. On the subject of inventory management, the textbook says that you need to manage your inventory carefully and make sure you're not overstocked, given the amount of working capital that ties up. Problem is that's under normal circumstances. So how do you practically move from just in time to just in case style of ordering?
Well, it's very, very hard because, as you said, our whole system, our whole manufacturing and industrial base is built on this. Hardware stores aren't designed to be warehouses, but what we are seeing in the building supply chain, as has been mentioned or alluded to, is the stockpiling of materials. And some of our big manufacturers now and suppliers actually have algorithms which they can use to see when orders are sort of unusual. So where someone is ordering something clearly that indicates that they are stockpiling, and again, because of allocation that's been used throughout the supply chain, they're trying to smooth that out. But look, practically, it's also hard because our whole system is built on having inventories of usually around about a month, so 3 to 4 weeks. So practically and physically, you have to be able to store this stuff. And what we did see in Auckland during level 4, when we could bring containers in, unload them, but not ship or send products, distribute products to the rest of the country, literally people ran out of space. And this is what's starting to happen even at the level of the ordinary builder, because they've never previously had to sort of store or stock material. They've just been able to go and get it when they need it. So all of that disruption is going to take some time, and it's also going to have a big impact, David, on cash flow, because people are locking up a lot of their capital in materials. That's going to take some time to translate before that comes back in terms of paid invoices. So it's going to take some while for us to get to a new model.
Okay, Scott, moving back to you. Talking about prices, I know some of the manufacturers I speak to say these supply chain bottlenecks are going to be around for the long haul. They don't see it settling down for at least 18 months. So that's going to lead to an upward impact on inflation, which we're seeing, downward impact on global growth, probably some decreases in asset prices like bonds and property as well. But do you think that there'll be increasing pricing pressures remaining over the short term?
Yeah, most definitely, David. We all hear of the record profits the shipping lines are making, but it must be remembered that they're also putting in record orders for new containers to be made. The cost per day of chartering a ship has skyrocketed, and the order book for new builds is full. So the shipping lines are spending money to try and catch up with these things. The new builds for them won't come on stream until late 2023, probably 2024, and they won't be seen in this part of the world either. So we'll have to wait for the cascading down of older vessels to be deployed onto our services, and only then will this have the potential to tip that demand and supply balance back in our favour.
Right. I mean, the feeling is the market's market's going to get tighter on capacity, and most of the carriers that I've heard have been on spot market pricing recently, so costs have been going up every week. Do you see that trend continuing, or will the carriers be prepared to lock in fixed prices?
Yeah. The shipping lines are spending huge amounts of money on their IT at the moment, which is good, and the focus is around that rate management and booking process for them. For larger volume shippers, there'll always be the case for contract rates. The spot rates on imports, yes, have been going up, as you say, but there has been some good opportunities on the export trades. So it's got its place in the market, but I also think there's the ability for both to occur. Okay,
thanks. I mean, Julian touched on it before. I've had a number of demonstrations to me from vendors on technological options for managing inventory. There's an interesting one that I caught up with pre-lockdown called Stocktrim in Auckland. I know, and looking at the current state of technology in regards to machine learning and predictive analytics and fancy ERP systems, do you think more businesses will need to move to that type of approach?
Yeah, I think so. These technologies are evolving very fast, and they're integrating capacities, with the accounting business systems. I think have proven a real asset for those that have taken it on board, especially for small to medium-sized businesses. For a small team, I think it's a simple solution. Inventory forecasting, needs to be backed by a reorder plan. and these lead times need to be variable. So I think it's very important.
Cool, thanks. Okay, if we move on to our next topic, so that's some potential solutions and potential ways to support the banking side of things. Steve, over to you. What's Westpac doing to help customers deal with these supply chain issues?
Thanks, Dave. Well, I think Julian hit the nail on the head when it was about cash flow, and understanding where companies are at individually is key. You can have all the generic solutions you like, but you've got to actually get into a customer's individual situation. So banks have got a key role to play here. There's significant pain, as we've learnt and felt, and that's only really starting to emerge and reflect itself in financial performance. As we know, importer distributors can't sell what they don't actually have. So year-on-year performance metrics, they're not really comparable. This is a brave new world, although identifying and explaining material divergences in your forecast is pretty achievable, because everyone knows what they're in. I mean, this is a global situation. This is the beauty of it. The true cost of goods, as Scott mentioned, that's escalating. Profit margins aren't always reflecting that. They're under pressure in a lot of cases because you've got fixed prices and you've got overhead that's increasing. Just needs to be more agility in passing that on, and ultimately it's going to just mean that price inflation emerges. It's pretty critical that companies are proactive in talking to their banks about the impacts of the shipping disruption, so we can work together. You're not alone in dealing with this. There are difficulties in most sectors. Banks can help you review your funding arrangements to make sure they remain fit for purpose in the new environment and reflect changes in the dynamics of the cash conversion cycles between the creditor payment and the collection of the debtor. We've looked at short-term working capital solutions for customers a lot more recently, extending trade finance facilities and overdrafts, even converting some core debt to 3 to 5 year amortising term loans to help alleviate cash holes with those inventory issues that customers are now faced with. They've moved through last year's inventory, often having a restock. It's not just in time replenishment anymore, it's just in case, as you mentioned. So you've got to buffer stock to stay in business, and it's pretty hard to move that through if you don't have warehousing capacity or anything like that. The key priority in times of adversity is maintaining liquidity. The increased stresses on free cash flow available to suppliers and customers, and balance can be often achieved between a deeper understanding of the business dynamics and working capital changes. So, I mean, things like Westpac, we have a pretty experienced team of trade specialists. We like to work with customers, understand their trade cycles, what's happened to them during this shipping thing. We can overlay the experiences that Julian and Scott have outlined in real terms and say, okay, this is how it's showing in cash. What can you do with your customers or suppliers? Often you can say to a trusted supplier, I'll go back and ask for extended terms. The backflip of that is often the supplier will say, look, I'll look after you. However, it'll be on cash terms. Can you pay us, ahead of lead time to get your production schedule? So that comes with risk. And like everything with risk, you've got to understand that it's a balanced equation, and ultimately you've got to manage the risk and be very aware and within your board parameters. So we also have a number of solutions for these circumstances, and we can't unfortunately solve them. So our main focus here is within the prudential parameters we have is to partner with businesses, and things like showing some flexibility around repayment scheduling, principal repayments. Just getting behind the numbers and saying, okay, so why is this happening, and what can we do together to make it work and maintain your stability as a business? And that needs to be good conversations. We like to get behind customers' own risk management around this. So we talked about China and dependency, and a lot of customers moved to away from key China, and it was China plus one. Moving to Southeast Asia, that became a geographical concentration risk too. So we saw companies diversify further and look to secure lines from new suppliers or globals in other jurisdictions like in the US or in Europe, paying way more than they've traditionally paid because of that whole change in the replenishment model and also in customers' risk management. So we like to work together with them, Dave, to understand it, help mitigate some risk. Talk letters of credit, which is an old instrument that actually has some real relevancy in this time, bank guarantees. Yep. That can allow an exporter to have surety of payment and get supply cash terms, extended cash terms. That type of conversation is always healthy, Dave.
Yep. Thanks, Dave. Trevor, over to you. You see a lot of what's happening out there in business and what businesses are managing through in terms of supply chain congestion in real time. What are the main issues that customers are telling you?
Yeah, thanks, David. Look, the feedback we got from our customers over the last month or so is they're just starting to see the impact now of some of the energy savings that have been imposed by the government of China. So if you haven't already seen it, they're down to 2 days a week, some of these manufacturing plants now. And that's on top of perhaps the larger companies that they're competing with, out of Europe and out of the States. So, they've got much larger bookings. They secure the actual goods prior to New Zealanders securing that. The other thing that we've seen as well is there's been, as probably Steve touched on, changes to the payment terms. In the past, on average, you'd probably see a 30% sort of deposit, and then the balance remaining 70% on the bill of lading date. Now that's changed for some of our customers now, where they're now starting to see that usual 30% deposit, but the remaining balance is when the goods are now being completed. So that means the risk has changed for them, which is Steve's touched on as well. That they're now having to sort of pay when the goods are completed. These manufacturing plants are then waiting for a container, which is what Scott's sort of mentioned before, and then obviously then the shipping. So the whole dynamics of the payment terms there and the risk accordingly has changed. So it's really just a case of making sure that your relationship with those suppliers are strong. Clearly, we've touched a little bit on letters of credits, but the main point is that most of our clients are wanting to secure the goods.
Right. And in terms of what are you seeing that the smart businesses are sort of doing and dealing with this? Some of the
Sure. I mean, the approach that a lot of our clients have done probably around about March this year is they've been talking to the likes of the warehouse and farmers. You would recall this time last year, stocks were low in most of those sort of shops. Getting toys in particular, those items for Christmas were very difficult. So, the warehouse farmers have been talking to our wholesale distributors about making sure that that doesn't happen again this year. They've actually placed their orders around about that April 2021 period. So they're actually being more proactive this year. So I'd expect that you're going to see some of the benefits of that come through rather than being reactive, which is what they were last year.
Okay. Right. So yeah. Okay. So Steve, looking at some of the options businesses can use to finance their operations, you mentioned letter of credit. What are the typical trade finance products that you deal with that you can sort of suggest?
Pretty vanilla, Dave. We talk a lot about supply chain finance and that sort of thing, but the fundamentals of this are making sure that you can, as an importer, you can secure your shipment. So you're providing surety to an exporter and using the bank's creditworthiness to substitute. Because a lot of customers will look at a bank risk differently to how they see, non-payment risks, because they don't know you or no one's trusting themselves in this environment the way they used to, trusting each other. Words like agile and nimble are sort of going out the door. We're moving to a world of complexity and often the old stable instruments and ways of financing the gap in working capital or providing a balance between the risk scenarios for both the buyer and the seller come into traditional instruments. So yeah, there's nothing new under the sun except they become more relevant to the circumstances. And when risk is prevalent as it is in the world today, I think it's a good time to sit down and look at all the options of procuring goods in a safe and secure manner within the parameters that you can control. You can't control the shipping element, but you can have visibility that, you need to receive your goods, on time, in full, on specification, and you need to be able to deliver to your customer commitments. This is just another tool you can deploy.
Right. And are you seeing any businesses teaming up and collaborating with other exporters and shipping companies at the moment?
There's a lot of increased interaction between relevant companies in the same sector, or even in different sectors have got some characteristics. And Scott will attest to this. There's a whole lot more conversations occurring with your shipping company. Sometimes the shipping company doesn't have time to talk to you, but if you're a customer, a lot of them will take the time to understand your circumstances. So, many non-primary exporters are actually importers. They need inputs, like Julian said, about raw materials and inputs. And you've got long tail dependencies on those upstream sources. So some good news stories are coming out of cooperation. For example, customers which have got shortages of key inputs, competitors are actually willing to share from their own stock, the stock on hand, or even allow access to their suppliers, introducing them. So there's a lot more of that happening, and people are really helping each other in order to survive and flourish as the world economy rebounds, hopefully. There's a lot of industries, or a few industries, that sort of have got a tradition of leveraging their expertise that's within the industry to deal with common threats, and examples of that are in the grape growing and vineyard industry. Wine is very much a community around that, and you've got labour shortages at harvest time, so you've got to work through all those effects and impediments to delivering to your business plans. And you will often have friendly rivalries in those industries that can be used. You also got forums. You've got the food and beverage forums. You've got Employers Manufacturing Association. You've got Chambers of Commerce. You've got university supply chain networks. So you can exchange your experiences, your strategies. You can adapt and adopt other people's. It's ideas, right? It's idea sharing. So yeah, you're seeing everything. The government's making good sort of noises in this area too, saying there's got to be a lot more awareness from across the supply chains, across ports, shipping lines, transport operators, logistics, working together for the greater good. And digitisation's coming to that as well, as we're seeing more sharing around networks and enablement of, I don't know if Scott will react, electronic bills of lading and such forth, but there are progressive, and this is the thing, all right? People don't want to handle physical documents because of COVID, so you look at other emerging technology. So you're talking AI before and machine learning. They're all coming in. A lot of the larger exporters are looking at these technologies and saying, how can they be adapted? And they're sharing those. So yes, there is collaboration of different types occurring, which is good. And look, collaboration, obviously banks can't collude with each other, but we're all aware of the common sort of things that we mentioned before. And we all want to support New Zealand's economy. There's no doubt about that. We try and be as flexible as we can in these circumstances. But the key thing is we're all in this together. New Zealand Inc. Let's try and be as helpful as we can. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. Well, I think we'll look at some of the questions that have come in on my little screen here. Here's one from Anonymous. The UK are currently experiencing empty shelves and fuel shortages. Is this something we're in store for? If so, what can we do now to mitigate this impacting our businesses? Fuel shortages. Julian, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. Well, look, I think part of that issue in the UK is Brexit, because they couldn't get the lorry drivers from Europe to come in. They needed 100,000 of them to physically take the fuel from the refinery. So the UK doesn't have a fuel shortage problem. They have a problem with not having enough lorry drivers, and this is what we are also seeing in LA now, with the port moving to a 24-hour shift. I think the CEO of that port said, well, that's all fine and well, but if we don't have the freight forwarders and the lorry drivers, well, then the rest of it's not going to work. So I think in terms of New Zealand, yeah, we We do have a big labour skills shortage. In fact, I see that possibly being one of the biggest issues that we've got. We just don't have enough people coming in with closed borders. You know, I mentioned 50,000 workers in the construction industry alone. We've got 60 a month coming in through MIQ. So I think we have to address the skills shortage across all sectors. And then I think we just have to be smarter at planning in terms of the overall supply chain and looking for alternatives, substitute products.
Yeah, manufactured in New Zealand, hopefully. Yeah, thank you. Here's another question. With people increasing stockholding volumes, is there sufficient storage capacity in New Zealand?
Yes.
Scott, do you want to take that one? Is there enough storage capacity here? We need to build some more warehouses.
I think the entire panel's shaking their head. No, definitely not. Yeah, as people are ordering more, people are selling more. They're ordering more. There's just not enough storage capacity throughout, especially in the Auckland area. The lockdowns don't help, preventing the flow through to the rest of the country. But no, there's the definite need there for investment into storage.
Actually, just on that, I think to Scott's point, it's going to be ongoing. I think we should get used to the fact that people, have been used to doing the whole sort of the click and collect and getting things delivered at home. I think that pattern is actually going to continue. So we're going to need to see further investment in, warehousing, inventory management.
Okay. That looks like all the only questions that I can see so far on my screen. Trevor or Steve, I mean, are there any anecdotes or customer stories that you'd like to share with the audience?
I'll just follow that up, I think, with what Julian and Scott were saying. I just had a phone call today, actually, regarding storage, where there was some contamination due to the fact that with one customer that's in the food and beverage sector of ingredients, storing that particular item, and they moved it to a separate, larger warehouse. It wasn't in proximity, but in the same warehouse was agricultural fertilizer. So, you see that contamination through no fault of anyone in terms of the customer, but, just as a result of not having enough storage. So they've had to look at writing that particular sort of amount of shipments off that are currently stored there. So that's just an example, I think, David, of what we're probably talking about with regards to lack of storage.
Right. Okay. I had a question as well. I guess, Scott, for you, in terms of consumers, I'm just thinking about Christmas shopping, and for those of us with sent a shopping list to buy. If you see something, I guess, buy it, even if it's not a brand that you normally choose. Do you think it's fair to say consumers are willing to pay more to get what they want? Scott?
Are they willing to pay more? I think they probably don't have a choice at the moment, is probably the case. A lot of it is built around fear. The ships are still coming in. There's a lot of containers coming in, a lot of orders on our books and others. So goods will keep coming in. It's just the delay and maybe not the choice, as you say. So you might need to change brands and possibly pay a little bit more for something slightly different. But I think if you haven't started your Christmas shopping, you best get onto it.
Good stuff.
If we can get to the shops.
If we can get to the shops.
Cool. Okay. All right. Well, I guess maybe we'll head to parting words. If we just go round everybody, and if there's one sort of piece of advice or reflection that you'd like to sort of share with the audience, please do so. And starting with you, Trevor, do you want to give us your parting words?
Thanks, David. Look, I'm sure it's all been said, but I think the key thing is really to communicate, especially from the banking side. Get into contact with your relationship corporate managers, international business managers. Just talk to them about what they're seeing. what's happening. Let's look at what you're actually doing and see how we can help. Thanks, Trevor.
Steve.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. Look, I'm just going to be a little bit obtuse. I read an article in the Harvard Business Review. It came out in September, October 20, and we've touched on elements of it today, but something that we probably, if businesses haven't done this yet, it's a really, really helpful. We've identified the problem and the cause. The solution's very hard to get. So incrementally, you need to do things that Scott alluded to, like thoroughly map your supply chain to uncover the risks. So if you haven't done that now, and a lot of that fragility that came out from real life still needs to be a little bit reflective and strategic. You need to back away and look at your distribution and transportation methodologies, how you get pathways to market. Talk to those companies, and as Scott says, don't be rash in moving away from them, but also you're looking at your dependencies or interdependencies on things like the way you move your goods. So therefore you've got to have like a flow chart of that type of scenario and picking out where your risks are within that, and then rating those risks. Is it a high, a medium, or a low risk? And we think the companies that have done this, and a lot of them have done it because they've been compelled to. It's been too easy up till now in a lot of ways, because the world has been on just-in-time replenishment. That was a global model. It worked. Everyone was encouraged to not hold the inventory. Some industries did hold inventory as buffer stock, and guess what? They made lots of money last year, but they've worked their way through getting rid of obsolete or secondary buffer stock, and they're now desperate to replenish and can't do it easily. So you just got to, every business is in different stages. Just go back and get to core principles. Think about it in the light of what this has exposed and how to build resilience into your supply chains for the future.
Thanks, Dave. Scott, what's your parting thoughts?
Yeah, I'd agree with both of those. I think it's real important for importers and exporters to be flexible. And as Steve was saying, do your due diligence on your own business, and be ready to make those decisions quickly when you get the opportunities. And I think the people we see taking those opportunities, and it might cost a little bit more, or it might take a little bit longer. It might be a 20-foot instead of a 40-foot container, or just something different that you're not used to. If you can see the value in that and move quickly, you'll do well.
Great, thanks, Scott. And Julian, over to you.
Yeah, look, I think it's all about planning. I think we are getting better at planning in general, and I can say for the building supply chain, we haven't been particularly good at it pre-COVID, but are getting better. I think it's also about innovation. It's looking for new ways of doing things. It's looking for substitute products. But also I think some people now are starting to see that actually now's the time to invest in technology to do things that they perhaps might not have done before or were holding off on. And so if you can automate a manufacturing process and use less people and become more efficient and increase productivity, then I think that's where I think the smart money is going at the moment.
Right, great. Well, we must have been so informative. There hasn't been too many questions, so that's great. I think we'll close it off there. Look, I'd just like to thank everyone for tuning in today, and thank especially our panellists for the great insights they've provided today. I've certainly learned a lot. Details of how to contact us if you have any follow-up questions or want to reach out will be on the screen, and please feel free to email us at events@westpac.co.nz, and an email will also be sent to all attendees with a recording of this webinar. Please also keep an eye out for future Westpac SMARTS webinars. I just want to finish off by saying that at Westpac, we're here to help our customers in these difficult times, so please reach out and contact us and start the discussion. Take care, everyone. Stay safe. Kia kaha. Thank you. Goodbye.